All right, well, Jim, let's do a little from the files.
Uh-oh.
I got a bunch of papers here. Let me move this. Oh, did I hit the wrong thing? And then it bounced off this.
I'm still connected.
Let me see what I have here. This is the Dave Meltzer file. Let's see.
Oh, boy. Now, from the Wrestling News Archives.
From the Wrestling News Archives, for instance, this goes back pretty far. October 3rd, 1982. Dear Mr. Keitzer, I apologize for the paper noise, Jace, and everyone at home. I'm enclosing a check for $16, which you can forward to your subscription department to extend my subscription for another year to the Wrestling News Wrestling Magazine.
When he told Norman he could forward it to his subscription department, that means Norman would put it in drawer C.
That's very true. Thank you for listing my name in your recent magazine per videotape swapping. Although I haven't heard from anyone from Japan, I have made some new contacts in the US. By the way, I hope you could list once again that I would like to trade VHS mode videotapes with fans in Japan, St. Louis, Texas, and Louisiana. Right now, I'm receiving weekly tapes from WWF, both shows, Florida, one show, Georgia, both shows, Mid-Atlantic, both shows, and AWA, one show, and can trade any of those shows with anyone who contacts me. As I wrote you earlier, I will be starting a bulletin in January 1983, and I'd like to hear from people who are interested in being correspondents. You have my name, address, etc., with an application on file. By the way, I've noticed your series on the various title histories in the magazine. I have a very complete records of the U.S. title recognized here in the Bay Area, dating back to the mid-60s through 1981. I don't know if you're interested, seeing as the title was dropped when Roy Shire stopped promoting, but I could do a very complete story on it if you're interested. The actual belt, by the way, was the oldest in existence as the same belt which was originally worn by Vern Gagne, called the US TV title. In the 1950s. That's the same sentence. In the 1950s was the same belt that Shires recognized throughout the 60s and 70s. I don't have photos of the guys with the belts, so with the story, however, most of the champions are internationally known competitors: Bill Watts, Fritz von Erich, Patterson, Stevens, Mosca, Morocco, Lonnie Main, Maivia, Dusty Rhodes, so I'm sure you have shots of most of them on file.
Dave is trying to spend this much time to pitch and sell Norm Keitzer on him writing an article about a defunct promotion that Norman Keitzer probably wouldn't pay more than $15 for to begin with, but there was no way for Norman to sell any magazines in San Francisco for the Roy Shire promotion because it was already out of business. And that's why, as we've talked about, Norman wanted to put articles in his magazine about the different territories that were active that would buy magazines from him.
Sincerely, Dave Meltzer. It's actually stamped David Meltzer with his address in San Jose, but he wrote Dave above David. P.S. I also have complete records from 67 to 80 of our World Tag title. And I have a response here from Jim Melby, November 3rd, 82. Dear Dave, hi. I would be very interested in publishing a story on the old U.S. Heavyweight Championship. I'm sure we have the photos in our files of the wrestlers involved for illustration purposes. There are some things I need from you first. Please read over the enclosed contract and letter of explanation. Also, I need your social security number for payment purposes. If you decide to submit the story, please make sure it's typed and double-spaced. Thanks, Jim Miller.
You know, they did take your Social Security number, but the thing is, nobody ever made more than $600 from that company in the course of one calendar year, so you never actually had to report it on your taxes.
Well, from January 14th, I have Dave's signed contract here. Dear Norman, enclosed is the debut issue of our publication, Wrestling Observer. Or I should say Observor, Observor.
Oh.
I've filled out the application. I'll be putting out a monthly publication but would like to warn you ahead of time that our publication date is the 20th of each month. This issue is coming out early, so to speak, just for future reference. The price is $150 per copy, or $5 for 4 issues. As the bulletin gets more popular, I will actually lower the price. But for the next 4 issues, the price will stay at this rate. This is why I'm only accepting subscriptions up to 4 issues. I wasn't particularly satisfied with this issue, although I do feel it's a damn good debut issue. Things will definitely pick up in the next issue, and coincidentally, I'm pretty sure by April that this will be the best bulletin going.
Wait till you see where we are in 40 years.
Thanks for your help. Yours in wrestling, Dave Meltzer, editor. And I have a signed contract here for.
So he's always been humble.
I guess you can look at it that way. I guess so. Well, there's a lot of stuff here. There's a lot here, more than I thought would be here. So bear with me for a moment. Writing to pitch stories. Did you ever have to do that?
No, basically, the idea, as I said, was that Norm Keizer sold all the magazines to the promotions who would then turn around and resell them in the arenas. So the more content there was on the Memphis guys, the more that they would sell in the Memphis territory. That's why Norman did different editions. There would be the main wraparound of the magazine that would have some stories that everybody would get, but there would be the NWA East edition, where it was primarily for the NWA territories in the East, or NWA West was out in Texas, or the AWA edition. He even did a Stranglehold edition for Bruiser's WWA just in the state of Indiana, maybe Chicago. But I would just, when I got some pictures or had an idea to write a story on one of the top guys in the territory or somebody new coming in, I'd just write it, put the pictures in, and send it to him. And he'd run it because Teenie told him to run shit about the wrestlers in the territory so she could sell more books. I never pitched anything.
All right, I have another letter here. This is after that first one I read back from Jim Melby, November 30th, 1982, from Meltzer. Dear Jim, received your letter the other day. Thanks for the prompt reply. Also, much thanks for your listings for the awards. I'll keep them in the strictest of confidence. Jim Melby sent in his submission for the Observer Awards. I will be sending you our yearbook in late January. I'm pretty excited about putting together a bulletin once again. That's fine about sending programs in exchange for it. One more thing. If you ever want to do stories concerning activities in Japan, I'm sure I could do a good job in that area. I have traveled there in the past and have a decent knowledge of the language, and from this area I do receive videotapes of all the TV shows and many clippings and magazines through friends in that country. I don't know how regularly you receive photos from Koichi and any of the others, but I can write stories about the various feuds and matches from that area. I think that an interesting article concerned the feud between Inoki and Fujinami versus Russia Kimura, Animal Hamaguchi, and Isamu Teranashi. Lots of interesting twists and a very wild bout, not to mention good crowds, have resulted from that. Aside from that, the only real major things going on are the tag tournaments, and I'm sure you're aware of that. I also heard that Inoki and Shinma had bought out LaBelle's promotion in Los Angeles.
Oh, good Lord.
But have yet to hear if they are promoting any shows or anything else. I am sure you know more about that situation than I do. Please keep in touch, Dave Meltzer.
Some things never change, do they?
That's one of the earliest, examples of Dave trying to pitch his expertise in Japanese wrestling. I mean, there weren't a lot of people in America, I would have to think, until videotapes that could monitor what was happening there properly.
Yeah, well, and also I wonder how many issues of the wrestling news that Norm Keizer was selling over in Japan. But that, that's the thing, is that the Wrestling News magazine covered a variety of eclectic things that the London publishing, the Bill Apter magazines, didn't cover, because after and under instructions from, the corporate hierarchy, they wanted to put on the cover the NWA champion or Bruno or Mascaras or somebody national that was going to sell magazines or Blood, sometimes or whatever. And most of the articles were the big geographic territories with the major population centers, WWF, AWA, Georgia because of TBS, etc. And so Norman filled a niche that the newsstand magazines didn't fill, that, he would cover there'd be something from Amarillo, for heaven's sake, and they were underrepresented.
Well, here's a letter from Norman Kietzer to Dave Meltzer, or as it says here, David Meltzer, July 21st, 1987. I have written to you several times along with the complimentary copies of the wrestling news I've been sending you, but I have not heard from you in over a year now.
Wow! So Dave was all fucking sweetness and light, sunshine, lollipops, rainbows, and waterfalls when he was trying to get printed, but now a few years later, he don't want to hear from his buddy Norman.
Possibly the address I had was wrong, as I got a notice from the post office today that the last issue of the wrestling news that I sent you was forwarded to the address I am sending this letter to. At one time, when I started to curtail the publishing schedule of the wrestling news, I sent you payment to make sure that you continued to send me your newsletter. That was over 2 years ago. At that time, you wrote me that I didn't need to send you payment because you would continue to send me the newsletter because my plugs in the wrestling news are what helped you get it started in the first place, and because I was continuing to give you free advertisements in it. I guess you changed your mind, which I can understand, but I have written to you several times saying I would like to be a paid subscriber and receiving no reply. Nor am I even sure I have your correct address at this time. Whatever the case, I am in hopes that this will reach you, and I've included a postage-paid envelope so that you can write me back and let me know the cost of getting to be a paid subscriber to your newsletter. Thank you, Norman Kietzer.
Oh, man, here, you can't even fucking back out of it because I didn't send a stamp. Here's a stamped self-addressed envelope. Well, I wonder what happened to drive a rift into their relationship.
It appears someone has made a mistake, too, in the middle of the Meltzer file of a bunch of pictures of Sam Menaker. Let me put these Someone filed wrong before it got to me, ladies and gentlemen. Going through a bunch of these papers here as they pop up. November 4th, 1985. Dear Dave, below is a copy of your advertisement as it will appear in the Wrestling News number 120. Please let us know right away if you want any changes in the wording of it. Otherwise, it will go in just this way. Also, always let us know if you want any changes in the future issues for your advertisement, other than updating as far as new material received. And then it has his plug here. And at that time, what was it? Dave Meltzer, Turlock, California, sent us 4 issues of his Wrestling Observer newsletter during the past 2 months. He doesn't promise an exact schedule, but it appears that it comes out about twice a month. Each of these 4 newsletters contain 8 letter-sized pages packed with news, results, inside information, and opinions on the major promotions. Dave charges $5 for a 4-issue subscription.
I thought he was going to lower that price when it took off.
He also asks that we mention that he has videotapes, and he charges $2 for a copy of his 50-page VHS tape listing of more than 500 hours of main event matches. You forget about that, the idea that it wasn't as simple as, hey, you have a tape, I'll have a tape, let's trade. Sometimes it was, but you had to get catalogs, you had to look through things, you had to have a conversation to pick out what you wanted. Someone wanted a compilation tape. That was a big pain in the ass.
Oh, a pain in the ass.
Any thoughts on any of this?
Yes, it was a pain in the ass. That's why Weasel Dooley was doing all of my duplication at that point. I was on the road. He was making he was culling it down into what I needed to see and sending it off to me at that point. A lot of interviews from the AWA program, but poor Dave. It seems that he He's left a trail of broken relationships everywhere he goes.
Here's a check mailed to Dave Meltzer for $50. December 26, 1987, right after Christmas, Campbell, California. From Norman Keitzer. Above check is for a 50-issue subscription to your newsletter. I haven't received an issue since last month. So I assume I am off.
Cutting this son of a bitch off right as said no grace period whatsoever.
So I assume I am off your comp list again.
Okay.
I want to get the newsletter, so I am subscribing. Enclosed is a copy of my latest issue, number 124, with your free ad in it. Also, a copy of the ad I plan to run in issue 125, which I'm working on now. And there's a check for $50, a copy of it.
What a no good. He's running free ads for Dave and having to send checks to subscribe for a year because Dave won't send him his shit.
And it appears this right here, is this the U.S. title story? Here's a letter from Dave Meltzer to Jim Melby, February 11th, 1983. Dear Jim, got your letter last week and always interesting hearing from you. Agree with most of your comments, particularly about the Japanese wrestling. I enjoy Inoki's group, particularly the junior heavies, the best also. Inoki's success at the box office shows also. These are written really poorly. Really, he has by far a better group of Japanese wrestlers in his stable, which is the main difference as both groups book similar number of quality Americans. As I think I told you, I'm familiar with the Georgia problems, but I don't know the reason. I do know people who see them live don't seem to like the promotion nearly as well as the people from out here who only know of them through the cable. To the fans out here, it seems the Georgia promotion is like the ideal promotion, so to speak. Other things may be good, but nothing can compare with Georgia. Although I don't know the reasons, I will assume that you're right in saying if they lived there, they wouldn't hold the same opinion. So let's stop there for a second, because Georgia TV was on cable and you could see it in different places. This is 1983, February 83. This was really the beginning years of World Championship Wrestling being seen nationwide. People in other places thought it was great because it was different than their wrestling. At the same time, people in Georgia were rejecting it.
Well, and that's true. And with a lot of places where they got over in the Sheik's old territory, Michigan, Ohio, West Virginia, not only had, as we've talked about many times, that had been dead and Sheik had stopped running, but the product the last few years of his promotion was just horrible in ring. Everybody was 80 years old. Or, you know, let's face it, Vern had major names and stars, but they were all old. And he didn't have a lot of action in his territory because it had been built that way and he didn't have competition. But when they see the Freebirds in Georgia, all this new young talent and an NWA style promotion with a ring that wasn't made out of concrete and guys taking bumps and cutting these wild promos, that appealed to Roy Shire's promotion had gone out of business a couple years before in Northern California, and it had been on its ass for a couple years before that. So where there wasn't a strong promotion or a strong youthful promotion, the Georgia TV was the thing everybody had to see. But in the state of Georgia, where they had not only been used to that style and that method of presentation, but every major name in the NWA had been in there regularly for the previous 10 years, they were harder to fucking please. And Ole's booking at that time, that 1983 period, guys were going to Japan and he'd just fucking, they'd be off and then they'd come back. It was kind of like Tony Khan's booking. You'd see him and then you wouldn't see him and things wouldn't make sense and phantom title changes and, well, the Road Warriors are here, but goddamn, last month it was a completely different team and somebody else was champion. And it was a mess in Georgia where they had been watching it weekly and going to the live matches weekly for years and years and years. That was the summer. We went to Georgia from Tennessee, me and Dundee and the Georgia Wrestling Superstars, because the state of Georgia, every town was on its ass. Columbus, Macon, Knoxville, Chattanooga, Augusta, Georgia. Nothing was drawn because they'd burn it out and it didn't make sense.
Well, back to this letter from Dave, February 11th, 1983. Most people who get videos from everywhere seem to say that Memphis has the best TV show. I know they get incredible ratings, but I never liked the show. It was always a little too uncontrolled for my taste.
Uncontrolled for my taste.
They certainly get more mileage out of their talent than any other group I've seen. My favorite show is also Mid-South, which combined an interesting and somewhat unpredictable hour with at least some first-rate wrestling, although I'm disappointed in their hero side with Stagger Lee and Two.
Their hero side. Let's remember, ladies and gentlemen, Dave was a stone cold mark at one point, didn't even know the lingo.
You know, Dave has always pointed to this example that when he used to have a problem, and when you guys would even try to talk about it, about Dave's changing thoughts on all this, he would point out that there were wrestlers who hated Memphis wrestling. That they thought it was Lou Thez or who did he say, Harley or Thez? I forget who it was. Guys who all ended up working there. Thez ended up opening a promotion in Nashville. But it was like guys looked down on Memphis wrestling. This is the first time I've ever read Dave say he looked down on Memphis wrestling.
Well, see, it always comes back to what Dave felt, and then Dave tried to find people that agreed with the way that he felt. But the guys looked down on the Tennessee territory more because of the payoffs, especially because Nick Goulas had set that precedent. But Jerry Jarrett wasn't going to go hungry at the expense of taking care of a wrestler. And the guys didn't mind working there, except for a Lou Thez who had somewhat, high standards. But it was the money, not the style of the wrestling. And Dave didn't get that. They would knock it just because they didn't want to come out and say, well, I didn't make any money there. They say, it's a bunch of bullshit. Yeah, and I didn't make any money doing bullshit. Other people made money doing bullshit, so they must be better than I am.
And by the way, for the record, attached to this letter, which is a little more too, a copy of the check sent to Dave Meltzer, San Jose, for the U.S. title history used in number 93.
How much did he make for that article?
$35.
Okay, I said 15. I was undercutting it.
I'm quite interested in how WWF draws next month in LA. AWA may get a good crowd on March 5th in San Francisco. I've heard a decent amount of comment about Lawler, plus Hogan versus Ventura has been very well promoted. Here's my social security number. I'll be sending you my bulletin.
What is that? Can you read that?
I am not going to do that. That is not allowed. I'd be most interested in programs from Mid-South, with Southwest and any AWA programs that aren't sold in this area, also of interest. Don't know your publication frequency, but we often have shows every 6 weeks, so I may not see all your issues of the AWA program. I really enjoyed the Japanese wrestling the most, because it was so unique. I treated in such a high-class manner, etc. I have tired of Abdullah and Singh's antics, although at first they were great. Sometimes, when they don't have good Americans, Baba's show is just tough to watch because it doesn't have the first-rate Japanese wrestlers. Inoki's Japanese villains make his show almost never tiresome, although they abuse that double count-out ending a little too much. That's all for now. Keep in touch, Dave Meltzer.
You know, the Japanese TV shows I first started seeing them in 1980. 80, 81, 82, 83, they were incredible. And we've talked about, you saw not only the best Americans, which Baba had the best Americans, and then his top Japanese 2 or 3 guys were okay, and then it dropped. Or Inoki was stuck with only having mostly WWF guys, but he also brought in the Mark Roccos and the guys from England, and it had more international flavor. It was a great show to watch wrestling matches, and you got to see, like, we never got to see goddamn Ricky Steamboat on television in Kentucky, but we got to see it on tape from Japan, or Nick Bockwinkel, or the Funk Brothers, or every top American, and the matches were good to great. But when I was watching, I was like, this is great. I'm getting to see. I liked, obviously, Tiger Mask was a thing, and Dynamite Kid was great. But as far as the Japanese talent, Inoki was good. We knew Baba, was past it at that point. Inoki had an aura about him, and his guys seemed like they wrestled harder, but there was an element of interchangeability. And there was also no promos, no interviews. So you liked being able to see the American wrestlers and the top stars that you hoped one day you'd get to see live or in your own territory. And wow, this match, Dory versus Terry going 56 minutes. That was a curiosity that you enjoyed seeing, but
didn't live up to the hype. When you saw the pictures and heard they wrestled each other, I don't know what I expected when I eventually saw that years after the fact, but it wasn't the match I saw.
Well, and they had to put Dory over, even though Terry was the more exciting at that point because seniority. Dory was the more well-respected guy because he came first. But point being, you got to see all that stuff, but it didn't replace Memphis wrestling or Mid-South wrestling or Mid-Atlantic wrestling where you'd have a Ric Flair or a Jerry Lawler or a Junkyard Dog or fucking whoever coming out and cutting promos and the personal issues and the angles and the fuck finishes to build the stipulations. That was what I liked about wrestling. And then, when you watch the Japanese tapes, which I still have every single one, I have a tape of every Baba and Inoki show from 1980 through 1992 or so. The matches were great, but I always liked seeing the American guys go against people you never got to see them work with. That Nick Bockwinkel wrestled some other great talent that only wrestled for Crockett and never went to work for Vern or whatever. That was the appeal and also Japanese wrestling is the only place then anywhere you got to see main event arena matches, which was wild and off the charts as far as holy mackerel, look what they're doing. So there was an appeal to it, but at no time did I or anybody that was watching or viewing it with me, Norman Dooley or whoever, think that program or that promotion could replace Memphis wrestling in Memphis or the Crockett's in the Carolinas or whatever. It was a curiosity from Japan that was cool to watch on video, but it wouldn't fly here, and nobody ever thought that, except Dave.
Well, this is going to be the end of part 1 of From the Files, Dave Meltzer, because I have a long back and forth here I have found.
And he do love to type, don't he?
Well, this is from 1984. It's pages and Norm Keitzer's reply of him having issues with Norm Keitzer's reporting and what he's reading in someone else's publication. So we'll get to that next time on From the Files.
What a tease. Dave's first foray into antisocial behavior.
Jim, if Norm Keitzer felt he got ripped off, if he felt I'm sending this guy money and I'm not getting the subscription, I'm giving him free advertising, and I'm not getting any issues at the Observer, and if he didn't have the music queued up also, he would probably sue.
Yes, he would, and I'll tell you who he would go to. He would go to the man, the myth, the legend, the man that could spring into action and lay waste to the evildoers. That man himself is Stephen P. New.
That's right, and as I said, the music isn't queued up, so...
I thought you'd have time to cue the music. Cue the music. Regardless, even if you can't carry a tune in a bushel basket, you can go to newlawoffice.com or you can call 877-50-STEVE and the man will come riding a white horse with a lance or a sword or one of those, the jousting stick, and he will knock the Black Knight off his horse and restore your justice to you and Maid Marian in a court of law, and then eat a turkey leg. He's the knight in shining armor of the legal profession. Stephen P. New, newlawoffice.com, 877-50-STEVE.
That's
Cue
right.
that music quicker next time.
We will have it ready next time. They know him all over the place. They know him very well in California. They may be knowing him really well in St. Louis soon, but Stephen P. New, the man for you, newlawoffice.com.
California, St. Louis, and Tokyo is next. He's going to chase Dave Meltzer wherever he's been.
877-50-STEVE.